All right, let's go ahead and dive into my Bitcoin Elliott wave analysis. Today, I want to do a special comprehensive overlook on not only just Bitcoin, but looking at gold, silver, oil, and NVDA, ES1, and then NQ. So let's go ahead, dive into Bitcoin first, and let's look at the macro view here. Now, I've been through this count before. This is an Elliott wave count of the overall cycle. So we have a three-wave print 1, 2, 3 from the white count, and we have had a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wave structure on the internal local count from the 2 to the 3. Now what we're looking at here is the overall count from 3 to 4 is which we're tracking here, so we're still looking at the white count here, right? So from the white count, we have the overall all-time high of about 126, given some change with some wave 3 hypothesis here. So if this is a wave 3 cycle high top here, this is the all-time high. We have a 5-wave structure down 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're looking for the 5th. Now we could already assume that this was 5 waves, and we're starting to print the B structure here, and that is one scenario to be thinking about. But on the off chance that we aren't printing this 5-wave structure here, and this is an extended wave 4, we have a lot of confluence liquidity down here, and this is a major buy zone. So for the bearish scenario that we are not printing bullish meaningful continuation right here, we're looking at the overall 5-wave structure down into something like this, right? So overall kind of an extended wave 5 into the 5th of the A, and then that would be the first 5-wave into the 3-wave into the 5-wave for the wave 4. Now you could always look at this as a 1, 2, 3, and then you would say, okay, this is actually your wave 4 here, and then we start to print impulsive behavior, but we haven't seen that yet, so I'm not looking at that count just yet. So when we zoom in locally here and we look at the overall range that we're in right now, right, we have completed, let's say, let's pull up the count here. So we have internal 1, 2, impulsive wave 3, comprehensive 4 into the 5th, and that's what we're looking for right now. But on the off chance that, 1, this isn't impulsive behavior, so this is 1, 2, we're looking for the 3 here, right? We have to see impulsive movement here for this to be a valid count here. So we would zoom in and overall look at the counts going in here. So we could say this is the top of 4. This is our first wave. We had a nice little ABC here into 2, 3, 4. Let's go ahead and change this up here, and then have an overall, okay, here's the first wave, the second wave. We are now looking for the 3rd wave, the 4th wave, and the 5th wave. This would complete the A, 5, 5, 5 of the 5 of the A. A lot of waves going on here. So overall, you want to be seeing something like this for the bears. The bears want to be sinking price into this lower K 60K zone, right? You want to see the confluence tapped in here, completing a WXY into the first wave, and then you have a bit of an ABC structure here. So you had your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 waves. So that's your wave 1. And then you have ABC, that's your 2. The C took out the first wave of that A, so 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. So you have your 3-wave structure there, and then you're looking at something like either 1, 2, so a shallow wave here, or just continuation overall. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is what we could be seeing here, and then a 4 to the 5. Now we could project on if this is a 1, 2, and we have that 3rd wave completed. Typically, you take the 1-to-1 extension, so you have your 1 and your 1, 6, 1, 8 for a 3rd wave extension. That typically gives you a zone of where to find the 3rd wave structure in that local count. So you obviously have your 1, 6, 1, 8 as the primary. I always look for the 1, 6, 1, 8, especially in a more higher time frame level. In lower local counts, I look at the 1. Now you can see that we would have something like in this count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that could definitely get us there, right? And the 4 always kind of retraces back to the 1 into the 2, and then you always kind of countermeasure. Okay, where's the 4 in that zone? So you could be looking at something like the full fib when you pull from the highs of 2s. You'd obviously pull it into the waves of 3s. And this would be getting you your 4th wave, but we have to obviously get there first. So what I'm looking for again is a impulsive move down into the 3 here. So this would be your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, giving us that overall 5 to the 5 to the A of the 5th, right? So there's just a lot of wave counts here that we're talking through, so I don't want to get too crazy here. But this is the bearish scenario that I'm looking for. Now there's 2 ways you could also play this as well. You could also look at it like this. You could say, okay, this was actually, let's get rid of these waves here. This was actually 1 here. Now we're looking for 2 into the 3 of the 4 of the 5, right? So those are some suggestions to be looking at, and obviously that would just be something like on a lower time frame scale, you'd have like a first wave, second, a third, a fourth, into the fifth, right? And then now you're kind of looking for an ABC. So let's go ahead and dive into those two scenarios. I have those mapped out here. And I want to pull up some confluence here for you all as we dive into those Elliott wave confluence zones. So we're going to take a fixed range volume profile. This is a simple profile in your fixed range volume profile 2 here. And then this is just going to be an overall pull from the, I like to find the overall high of this range, which takes us to about the volume here. Now you can definitely see here that we are definitely trading in this range. It's well respected. You have your point of control, the value area low, and the value area high. And so overall, the last few days on Friday, I took a long setup on Bitcoin here because I like to play the auction market theory, which is the value area low of this range. Full rotation down, which was well respected, had a liquidity pull here. We came up and took a POC tap here, SFP, and that was a nice TP1 for us. So now what I've done is I've taken a 2% setup here. I've locked in some profits from my overall, so about 2.5, 3% on this long setup, right? So overall, I've taken a winning trade setup here at the lows of the value area low, and I've taken 25% off the table here. Now I'm keeping this open here, my stops, at about 64,000. Now, why am I doing that if I'm just talking about how Elliott wave can go lower? Well, there's a few reasons why. Because one, if we go back to our count and we say that this count here, so we were looking at the overall, theory that this is a larger count into 1, 2, and we're looking for the 3 down lower. However you're looking at it, right? Price in any count is still going to bounce here, whether it's wave 1 here or it was the the second wave of the internal 3. Now the other count is we were looking at a WXY. Now this was the WX, Y. So you can see you have a 1, 2, 3. A 1, 2, 3, a 1, 2, 3, price moving in threes. That's corrective price behavior. But here we could also say that price is moving in threes, right? This is the conflicting count, 1, 2, 3. So we could be getting actually a WXYXZ, which would be a 333 correction. Now I do think that this is the most unlikely scenario in my opinion, because when we kind of start to look at, this is the high of wave 2 here, and we do a Fibonacci pull, when we come up to the 618 and the 66 in a wave 4, in this context, it's very unlikely that wave 4s retrace to a 618 and reject. The highest probability in that scenario is that the wave 4 is incorrect and we have a different count. Now, it doesn't mean, of course, in volatile assets like Bitcoin, right? You have 1, 2, 3, and we have a 4 here. That doesn't invalidate it because the wave 1 is here. So we could honestly even come up to the 786, which would be a very extreme wave 4. But obviously, this is one scenario that I'm just kind of looking for on the outlook. And this scenario not only covers the WXYZ, so yes, I'm making a long play down here. And if it is a WXYZ, okay, great. We have the long setup and we continue to trade this swing up into the 618 pocket. If it's not, and we actually still come up into this and we continue and trend further and take the 618, right? And we have meaningful continuation higher, well, then that goes back to the hypothesis of the count that I shared earlier, which is if this is not an overall wave 4, right? If this is not an overall wave 4 and the 5 is in here, then we're making that B wave suggestion over here, right? And either way, I'm in a long trade here, and I'm still holding my long from 63.62, and I'm in my my spot. So I'm covering the scenarios of the WXYXZ, and I'm covering the scenario that this is a 5th wave in, and then we're making a really large 1, 2, 3 up into the B, and then we're waiting for the the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in that scenario. So overall, this is the conflicting and bearish counts, the bullish counts. I mean, you just have to really be prepared for all of these counts. Now, do I think the WXYZ is likely? No, but I'm just preparing for it, and I'm just having a simple, get rid of Elliott wave in this context altogether. Auction market theory, we have a nice defined range here. We've swept the lows here. We've swept the lows here. We've taken liquidity here. The only resting liquidity sits below these levels here, right? Which is where I place my stops. Now, if I place my stops and the stops are set here, and we come back up into this and we do this, then I will simply look for another long and take the SFP of that value area low. But in my humble opinion, I do think that if we lose this zone here, I mean, there's no reason why we wouldn't come down and take the 60K liquidity. And that's, the overall reason why I'm still being very patient and not going crazy with setups here. I'm taking 2% setups. I'm not taking more than, I think, I did take a 3% here, but I'm not taking anything above 8% in a larger swing set. Obviously, if we get a SFP down here and we start to look at this liquidity, then I'm looking at 10% of my portfolio to put on the table for a long there. So let's go ahead and look at some other confluence here on BTC, and then we'll go overhead and look at ES1 and NQ. So what could we do in this zone? We can take a 618 Fibonacci pull from lows to highs here, and we can look at this here, right? So we have a 618 here, and this is a very key level for us to take. So overall, I mean, what we could be doing here is looking at this zone here, the range high of this here. That is a key level to take, 618. So if we come into something like this and rise into it, okay, awesome. That's a short setup that I would be looking for, right? And obviously I'd be taking a TP2 on the value area high of this long, but in short context, this would be one of the, I mean, that's a pretty wide invalidation, so that would be a hard short to be looking for. But overall, I would be looking for something like this where we have a rotation again to the value area high, sweep the highs of this here, and then if we have some sort of rejection, okay, then I wouldn't be placing my stops here. I'd be placing at the highs, the assumed highs of this SFP, right? And then you have a much better validation there and a more favorable trade to look for. And you can continue to just play rotational plays until market discovers where it wants to go, right? Because this is the true value of the market. Out here is where price wants to expand. So taking these rotational plays, range trading is not a bad play to have, and we'll continue to look at those, but that's still just gonna be 1 to 2% risk for me. So that's one short setup that I'd be looking for. If we go back to, this is a wave 3, right? So if we're looking at this in the context of this is a wave 1, 2, and we're in the middle of a 3, this could be the wave 1 of 3, right? So then we have a 2 potential for here, and we could be seeing something like this where it's an A, B, C. And if we have that scenario, I will be looking, and this again is a harder trade to look at, so this would be a smaller setup for me. But I would be taking the 618 pull from the highs of 2 to 3, and I'd be also looking at the downtrend anchored VWAP, which comes in very nicely at these levels. And we can see if we have any levels or NPOCs. No. I mean, we do have the weekly backup at 72, again, which matches up with a sweep into that 618 higher up into here, right? That plays nicely into that. However, this wouldn't be a bad swing to look for in the context of, okay, if you're an Elliot wave trader, and if you're an Elliot wave trader, and you're looking at this as a wave 1 of 3, you would want to see like an ABC into this, so a 3-wave structure, into that downtrend anchored VWAP, into the 618 golden pocket, and then a rejection followed. So, for me, that would be a more reactionary based trade. I'd wait for the 618, the downtrend anchored VWAP to be hit, and then do the same where you place your stops above that assumed high. For me, this is too much invalidation here. This is where I'll be placing it. And that would be like a 1.5% setup that you could try and take. I mean, too, if you want to be aggressive. For me, managing risk inside this area is key. I really want to get aggressive and, risk off below these levels here. So that's the second short that I'd be looking at here. And in terms of longs, I'm in the long that I'm looking for Bitcoin right now. I think, yes, you could still settle into a long. I wouldn't be taking anything below this, right? Like I said, you could have a move down, take out the 64K low, you could take out this low, you could take out this low, come back, and then, essentially rotate into it. And if that's the case, well then, maybe I'd be looking for something, as a reclaim setup somewhere halfway, or if you really saw some bullish continuation, then you'd be you'd have to take the again though, when you look at the risk to reward, you're not you'd want to be targeting way higher than that. But we'll cross that bridge when it comes. That's something to think about and just keep in mind, right? So overall, I'm gonna stay in this long, and I'm gonna keep my invalidation at 64K. Simply because I don't see any other long scenarios until 60K. So I'd really just want this one to be the one setup area that I'm going to take, and I'm not going to be like, oh, okay, if we lose this, then I'll take a setup down here and hit it here and here and just keep losing the whole way down, right? I'll take it here. I've already taken profit here, so if we get stopped out, that's fine. That just becomes a neutral trade, and it is what it is. That's part of trading. So I've walked through Elliott Wave. I've walked through this entire range here. What I'm looking at, you have your levels within these levels. We've longed the weekly here, but really again the confluence sits below 60K, and then above, our high of 75K that talks about the WXYZ scenario. So this is really what I'm looking for on Bitcoin. In the long, I will be looking for shorts either at the downtrend anchored VWAP or the obviously the the 72K zone here, and being really patient with those setups here. If we continue to just break through down here, then I will be simply patient waiting for the longs here and just, letting price do its thing while it resolves in this zone. I won't be trying to chase. I won't be trying to long. I will be simply waiting with my plan down here. So that covers for Bitcoin here. Let's go ahead and move over to ES1. Now let's talk about the stock market. The stock market, obviously there's a lot of fundamentals at play, and there's a lot of things going on over in the Middle East. Now, we've seen a bit of bearish behavior here now, and you could typically classify, what are we down here by 10%? That's earlier warning bear market stage for the S&P 500, right? So overall, I was interested in adding to my portfolio on a spot basis at this weekly level, downtrend anchored VWAP from our overall April 25th lows of 2025. So overall, I think here I'm not interested on any plays on ES1 until we see a bounce, so to speak, and we make some sort of higher low print. If we start doing something like this here, and then we have positive continuation, then I'll do a reclaim setup or a higher low, and I'll look to add to my portfolio. I personally don't really play futures or options on ES1 right now, but I look at it on the overall context of how the market is acting with other stocks. And when we go look at NQ, it's the same play. NQ, I have a big volume profile printed here. If we start to lose this profile here, I mean, that's very bearish, and we could see a very big drop to the downside here. And I really honestly wouldn't get interested in NQ plays until I see in the 16,000s, right? For me, that's just swings. That's just how my portfolio and how I plan to play this. So when I think about overall context for these two markets, I'm just being very patient. These are very big markets and fundamentals. Yes, they do respect technicals, but with everything going on in the world, it's better to be just patient on these plays. And where I will have risk on is the one asset that I've been looking at is NVDA. NVDA is a very strong, obviously a very attractive narrative right now in the AI space, in computer manufacturing. So overall, in terms of where am I looking for aggressive plays, I'm not going to be playing ES1, I'm not going to be playing NQ, but I will be looking at NVIDIA. And I really have been waiting for this downtrend anchored VWAP to be hit here on NVIDIA, right? And we've, let's see, how long has it been since this all-time high? Yeah, so about 152 days I've been waiting for this one. And really, I want to see an SFP, a tap of this, and then have some sort of long setup here, and look for an overall 70% play, and this would be a long-term hold. But with the current narrative of ES1 and NQ, this is going to be an aggressive play. So I'm happy to look for a setup here, and then I'm happy to look for a setup down here at 131 and 141. And personally, me, I've played NVIDIA for the last 4 years. I've had my longs down here and here that I've closed, and I've sold them about 200. So I've made some significant gains on NVIDIA, and I'm happy to be a little bit aggressive here. And, if I get stopped out here and I get stopped out here and I get stopped out here, I am going to be giving up a bit of gains with NVIDIA, but in the context of how much of gains I'm giving up versus what I made, it's a very different story. So if you're looking at this and you're looking at playing NVIDIA, you just have to be comfortable with the idea of being aggressive here, knowing the narrative ES1 and NQ, and knowing that there's some risk on the table here, and I'm being a bit aggressive with my risk. And I'm also happy to do that because I've had my gains made from, these lows here. Again, essentially I'm just looking to print another low here to capture on that move up. So I'm happy to take a bit of risk here once or twice or 3 times if I need to, and just capture that overall play, because NVIDIA is a really great stock that I really want to capture on. So just just an FYI, if anyone's looking at this, and just don't put yourself in a position where you're going to continue to lose and you don't have gains that you've made, right? That's just why I'm sharing my plan here. I've made the gains from these runs, and I'm happy to give a little bit of percentage up if it's taking more risk and making more gains. So overall, it's still net positive on my books here. So if that discourages you, then don't look at NVIDIA right now. There's other places to be looking at, which brings me to let's go ahead and look at gold here. Gold, actually, we'll come back to gold. Let's look at silver. Silver is one of those that I'm looking to play right now, and again, be aggressive on as well. So let's look at some levels here. We have an overall range that I'm looking at here, and I did take a long earlier today on gold here, and it's a bit underwater right now. We're doing a weekly open retest right now, and I've placed my stops below the lows here. One thing that has me cautious on this right now is we've seen this massive run up on silver, and this was in the context of a wave 3, and we've seen a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, an ABC, and then overall looking for a large WXY structure down. Now I'm debating here holding this or looking for one more push lower here in terms of a 1, 2, 3. This is the 4 into the 5, right? Now we could still be playing this as a larger ABC, and this would be your 4, right? And then we at least capture some here, and then we play, move back down for the 5th wave, and that would be your overall larger, macro wave 4, right? So this is one of those plays. Again, this is aggressive. This is a 2% setup for me. If we start to lose the weekly open and come down here, I may just, kind of close this and look for a lower setup here. I'm happy to, again, take that risk here, especially with Bitcoin being very indecisive. Looking at playing other markets, that's kind of what we do, right? In terms of gold, let's look at, again, it's kind of the same thing here. This is either a 5 or a 3. I'm not going to have much confluence to share with you on this, right? But overall, you have a volume profile. You're below the lows of this. If you look at the overall, let's see here. Let's go pull from here. You can see that you bounce nicely at the POC right here, right? So if gold continues to do a full rotational play down into here, it's had an ABC, and it continues to rotate down to the value area low, that's going to do the same thing. It's going to bring that lower to silver, right? So at the end of the day, you want to be patient on silver, but I will take that risk on silver here. But if gold has that move down, obviously to that's value area low, that's going to bring silver down to the weeklies down here at the 54, 50, 45, right? One thing I was also looking at too, I have this volume profile pull here, but if we look at the lows from this, it makes sense that we could see a play way down here and have it rotate to the value area low, and then you have a very that's where I'd be taking at like a 3 to 4% setup swing on silver and playing that in a larger degree, and then you have a larger, your WXY into this. Very nice. You have the POC, the value area low on the weekly. That's why I might just be a little bit patient here, closing it for a bit of a loss right now. That's totally fine with me. Live to fight another day on this, and so on and so on, right? Let's look at oil. Oil, in my opinion, right now is a very fundamental asset to trade. There is technicals that we can look at, but obviously we've seen some crazy price movements happening on oil, and technicals kind of start to go out the door of that. But we do have a bit of a harmonic in play. So we have an X wave down to an A, to a B, to a C, to a D. Now, I think you can have a favorable short play right here if you start to have some sort of high put in here at D, right? And then you start to lose this daily and you come down here, and overall, I mean, you can start to, if you start to print lower highs, in this zone here, and you have something like this as well, then you can take a play here at the lower high and then try to place it at the high as an aggressive play and play that down, even to the POC here, if not lower here. So oil, again, with narrative, you have to be cautious of what's going on in the Middle East and the war tensions. You have to be aware of, day-to-day current events in case you just get blown out of the water. I don't like to trade oil, but if I am going to trade this, I'm going to be looking for just a 1% setup and just capture on a larger, just move down and passively play that in any way that I can. But overall, this is what I'm looking for on oil. So we've covered Bitcoin, we've covered oil, we've covered silver, we've covered gold, we've covered ES1, we've covered NQ. For me, that's we've also covered NVDA, right? So for me, that's really the main assets that I'm looking for right now. I think going back to the overall ES1, I mean, we have to be cautious. We're in a bit of a bearish setup here, and we need to just understand where we are in the market. Same with Bitcoin here on the overall play. I mean, obviously, Bitcoin is in a bear market, whether you like it or not. We've obviously put in a major high here, and we've had nothing but weakness as we've come down into this. Now, that doesn't mean we can have a nice bounce, and overall, I mean, that's why I'm keeping my longs here and here, right here and here. And if we get stopped on those, that's great, because then we'll have a very clear picture of a fifth and final wave exhaustion level, and we can start to play very nice exhaustion patterns with order flow confirmation to look at spot trades. And I think overall this will be a very, very nice confluence area to trade up. And for me, I'd be looking at least 100K, right? So wherever you kind of look at, I mean, you're looking at still like 70 to 100% gain on this overall, right? There's my silver trade right there, crossing the weekly open. So personally, guys, I think for me, I might just close this silver trade, this long trade that I've taken, and wait for the move down here, right? And then again, that's just in the context of Elliot wave. So overall for Bitcoin though, again, we are in a bit of a bear market. How I want to wrap this up for you guys is overall being patient, still being patient, making sure that everything happening here, you're not just getting chopped up and throwing your portfolio away. This is where you really want to conserve capital. And you want to just wait. You want to be very patient for, that golden opportunity, right? If we have, if you just look at the overall range that we've been in here, I mean, really, we've done nothing for how long? Since we printed that low, 52 days. I mean, that's almost. I mean, that's a lot of time. Yes, we've played the ranges here and we've settled in some trades, but overall, your better play is going to be down here versus trying to settle into bigger longs here. So overall, be protective of your capital. Continue to look for the signs, W, X, Y, X, Z, or you just have the larger, ABC if this is the fifth wave in. Otherwise, me personally, I'm looking for this fifth wave extension down, and so it's an A to play that back up to the B, right? And wherever that lands, I mean, really for me, that's just going to be playing the golden pocket of this. So, if we get, let's just say, a fair value of 55,000, on the fifth wave here, and we play that up, I mean, that's almost 100% gain on a swing setup. So overall, this is what I'm looking for. I hope you guys enjoy, and as always, happy trading.